Hello, my name is Mark, and I am the lead and founding pastor of Lux Digital Church. I lead a church that is entirely inside the gaming community and occupies, well, a studio, but no real physical space where our church gathers together. I was a pastor, a youth pastor, and a discipleship pastor for 11 years at a physical church outside of Pittsburgh, PA. And just about 2 years ago, my wife and I departed from that church to start a brand new expression of church that exists entirely in digital space. And if you've been watching this video series already, that shows that you're at least interested in rediscovering your church's digital why. And for many of you, that may be figuring out what you're doing with your live stream after COVID-19, or figuring out what you're going to do with this person who's been coming to your church online but lived 5 states away, and you're simply not really sure what to do with Sally, who lives in Kentucky and can't come to your church physically. So I hope through the video series, you've been able to rediscover your church's digital why. And today, I want to talk to you about the power and the importance of digital-only churches and digital-only church planting. And you might have some red flags that go up immediately, and you might be thinking of various passages throughout the scripture that would tell you that I'm a bit of a heretic. So before we jump into my 3 reasons why digital church planting is important and your digital strategy matters, and then 3 practical tips as to how you can get started in digital-only church planting and developing digital discipleship strategies, what I would like to do first is emphasize that I wasn't a digital-only person either. In fact, I was more of a micro and house church model type of guy. And for 11 years, I did serve a physical church. But God has moved us here because of some of the things that I'm going to talk about today. And if 6 years ago I had watched this video of me, I probably would have thought that I was a heretic and moved on to the next video as well. But if you've made it this far into the video and this far into the playlist, I'm assuming you're at least interested or intrigued enough to hear me out. So let's talk about 3 things as to why you should be considering planting digital-only expressions of church or digital campuses. And then beyond that, let's talk about 3 practical things that you can do to start on that journey now. First, the next generation doesn't use online space as a tool, they live there. The next generation doesn't use online space as a tool, they live there. I'm 34 years old, and I can remember when my house first got dial-up internet, which means I remember what life was like before the internet and afterwards. And if you're watching this video, my guess is you probably understand and remember that as well. I remember having to type my first things on a typewriter. It's what my mother taught me on. I also remember going to the library in middle school and pulling out encyclopedias and being taught how to do research with real books. But by the time I was in high school, all of that had changed because of the internet, and that has revolutionized and changed the world. But if you can remember the internet coming into your life, just realize that the next generations can't. Young millennials and Gen Z have only known a life where there is limitless information at their fingertips. As my daughters, who are currently 5 and 3, are learning about themselves and figuring out who they are, YouTube is creating an algorithm that is also, at the same time, unique to them. The places that they go online are learning about them as they learn about themselves. For my kids, and for many people who are in Gen Z and Alpha and lots of young millennials, the internet isn't a thing that happened to them. It's a force of nature, not unlike the wind. It just is. They can't imagine what life would be like without access to it at their fingertips every day, all the time. And as a product of that reality, they have learned not just to use the internet to research things or find information or get from point A to point B or even post stuff about themselves. They have begun to learn how to live there, establish and build relationships there. There are people inside of our digital church that met their maid of honor or their best man at their wedding for the first time at their wedding, but they had been gaming with them almost every night online for a decade. Those relationships are real because they invested their life in those spaces, and the next generation is doing that in spades. While we see real life friends and online friends, and sometimes don't see our online friends as real or genuine friendships, we just call them online friends or IRL in real life friends, the next generation simply sees that they have friends. They don't differentiate nearly as often as we do. And the world and technology are quickly changing. The days where technology was intrusive to us are fading, and cell phone developers and app developers are making screens that go to the outer edge of your phone to make a seamless digital and physical experience, immersing you and allowing you to hybridly jump between one world and the next. The reality is, the next generation is living in digital space, and for many of them, the only place that they're going to be able to encounter a church is inside the places that they're already living. The second point that I want to make is this: digital expressions of church are not a threat to what you're doing physically. They should align with it. Digital representations of church are not a threat to what you're doing physically. Instead, they should align with it. The reality is, church is not about putting on a service, even though that's often where the majority of our time, energy, and financial resources are put, is performing and putting on the Sunday morning service. The truth about the church is that our mission is to make disciples. And when we allow the mission of the church to be the mission of the church, to make disciples, you'll suddenly realize that digital spaces actually align rather well. A lot of senior pastors that I talk to are intimidated by or don't really want to get invested in digital space simply because they don't understand it. They don't realize or understand how deeply relational and impactful digital relationships have the ability to be. Instead, when we look at the things that are online, what we see is Instagram influencers and viral YouTube videos and celebrity digital pastors, or pastors who are getting lots and lots of views on YouTube and on Instagram. And we think that that type of lifestyle requires maybe a lot of luck and an entirely different skill set and an enormous sink of time, energy, and resources. But instead, what I have found is when the digital church is aligned, just the same as the physical church should be, on making disciples, the exact opposite is true. In fact, all of the same skills that I developed as a pastor at a physical church to build relationships, to disciple people, to counsel people, to meet people where they are, to offer spiritual guidance, to be compassionate and loving and graceful and kind and honest and truthful, and all of the things to spur on and build systems and connect people so that they can follow Jesus more fully with their lives, are the same exact skills that I have been using for the past 2 years as the lead pastor of Lux Digital Church. Because the reality is, people are people. They're the same whether you're meeting with them in a coffee shop or you're meeting with them across a webcam and a microphone. They have the same fears and the same needs. They're on similar spiritual journeys and stuck in similar spots on that journey. They need help with very similar things, and they're facing very similar obstacles. They have similar hopes, and they have similar fears, and they have similar anxieties and joys, and they celebrate similar things. They're people, just the same as anybody who shows up to a physical church is a person, which is why aligning your digital strategy or your digital church expression or digital campus with your physical church's strategy of making disciples is so vital and important, because otherwise you'll feel like you're competing for resources. And I realize that you might already be thinking that, well, this is all well and good, and sure, I would love our digital presence to be centered around discipleship, but you can't make disciples with people that you can't meet with in person. If I can't hug you or shake your hand, then I can't disciple you. And I would just encourage you to hang in there as we talk about 3 ways that you can start leaning more heavily in to digital space. I'm not going to make a theological statement or even quote a whole bunch of scripture at you, but I will give you 3 ways that you can start experiencing genuine, deep spiritual discipleship happening in entirely digital space. But let me go to the third reason why you should be leaning heavily in to not just digital experiences and the digital expression of your church, but perhaps planting digital churches as well. The third is this: there are people who can only be reached online. Now, this wasn't always the case. The world at one time or another, when people's lives fell apart, assumed that the church held the answers. So when someone would go through a hard time, they would frequently return to church. They lost a loved one, they lost their job, they're dealing with a horrible diagnosis. They would frequently then return to church and they would look for answers. But that isn't the case anymore. In fact, many people in the coming generations don't see the church as a potential solution to their problems. They see them part of the overarching problem. In a world of live streamers and YouTubers and Instagram personalities and TikTok influencers, the influence of the world has shifted to people, individuals, and has shifted away from organizations and companies and governments, including churches. By and large, the coming generations simply do not trust our churches, and they're not coming to us when they're going through something difficult. Instead, they're jumping on their phone and they're Googling solutions to the problems that they're facing, which is one of the reasons that meeting people where they are online is so vitally important. Not all that long ago, people hung out on their front porches before air conditioning. Not all that long ago, people came to communal spaces to gather together and to hang out, but a lot of those things aren't happening anymore. In fact, most communal spaces in our culture today have largely been boiled down to your favorite coffee shop and your favorite microbrewery. And yes, you can meet people across the table in those places that normally would never come to your church, but the reality is almost every soul on the planet can at this point be connected to, in one way or another, through the phone that's in their hand connected to the internet. In almost every third world country I've been in, people didn't have food, but they did have access to Facebook, which is absolutely wild and mind-boggling. But you, through the phone that's in your hand or the computer sitting on your desk, have the ability to connect with almost anybody on the planet. And to be honest with you, many of those people would rather go to hell than come to your church. Many people would rather roll the dice and risk hell than go through the doors of a church in this life. It's just the reality that we're facing. They don't feel like they can trust churches, and they've sworn off and decided to never go to one, no matter how bad their life might get or what might come up that might stir them to go to church or how many invites they've received. They live within driving distance of phenomenal churches, but it doesn't matter how comfortable the seats or charismatic the preacher or how tight the worship pastor's pants are. They're simply not coming to church. And you and I both know that that's true. We've had firsthand experience with it. And the reality is that for most of them, the only place to actually meet them and tell them about Jesus is through the computer that's in front of their faces all day at work, the phone that's in their hand for hours and hours every week, or the gaming system that they jump on every single night. The reality is, in the next generation, the place to meet people where they are isn't in the church building, isn't at our trunk and treat event, isn't even at the park or at wherever it is that you would go for a communal space. It's going to be in digital communal spaces. As physical ones have diminished, the digital ones have only grown. And this includes places like Discord, subreddits, virtual reality, and social media. And so I hope that by talking about these 3 reasons why your church's digital engagement matters, it will stir up something in you to want to reach people that aren't just shifting from one church to another, but are genuinely far from God, who've abandoned the church and have no intention of coming back. They're actually at your fingertips, and you and your church have the ability to reach them through both your digital strategy for discipleship and also, I believe, through digital church planting. So now let me give you 3 quick tips for how to put your big toe into that otherwise seemingly scary and endless digital ocean, because it might seem a bit overwhelming to you. You hear me talking about digital relationships, but you don't really know how to engage with that, and you're not actually 100% sure that they're real. So I'm going to give you 3 very simple and easy ways to get started in building digital relationships and start making disciples through digital means. First is this: learn to build digital-only relationships. I realize that might be intimidating to you, or you might think that that's not even possible. Your experience with digital relationships has mostly been the people that you've encountered on Facebook that have liked your posts or reposted them or said something rude to you, or the arguments that you got in over 2020 on social media. I realize that a lot of people's experience with digital relationships has been largely negative. But the truth is, in today's day and age, all of our relationships are some hybrid form of both digital and physical mediums. If you don't believe me, let me give you an example. My parents, let's say we go over to their house for dinner. We live about 45 minutes from them. We grab the kids and we go over for dinner on a Sunday night. And yes, we gather around the table together and eat. But that Wednesday, I'm texting back and forth with my father about a project in our home and about our plans for the upcoming weekend. And then the next day, I FaceTime with my mother so she can see my 2 granddaughters. And then later that weekend, we're back at their house having dinner with them again. well, it's a beautiful representation of a family. And if I told you that, you wouldn't look at it and say, well, the dinner was real and the dinner was real, but everything that happened in between happened over technology, so it's invalid and void. It doesn't exist and it shouldn't be taken seriously. No, in fact, my daughters engaged with their grandmother over FaceTime, which was a beautiful thing and gave them a chance to connect with grandma. My father and I built a stronger relationship through communicating on a house project and making plans for the upcoming weekend. So, why is it that we will give credit to digital means to build relationships if we're able to hug an individual, but we will never give it to them if we're unable to hug them or high five them or shake their hand? You see, digital relationships are not only possible, but they're vital and important in the world that we live in today. And we have to learn how to build relationships with people that, what I like to say, we never get to hug till heaven. So here's my encouragement to you. Start a small group on Zoom full of people from your church that only come to your services online, and don't make plans to meet up with them in person. Just invest in them digitally. Find somebody in your life who doesn't live near you who you can begin discipling one-on-one. Meet with them over a Zoom call or a Discord call or Google Meet once a week and just begin investing your life in them. I promise you that when you see the power of digital relationships, it will be the keys to the kingdom, to understanding digital discipleship, which will also be the keys to understanding and unlocking digital expressions of church and your strategy as a church when it comes to using digital space. I promise that it will change everything. Many of my closest relationships right now, after 2 years of leading a digital church, the people that I confide in, the people that I invest in, and the lives that I'm seeing radically transformed every single week come from digitally exclusive relationships with people that I may never meet in person. I'll give you a quick example and then we'll move on to point 2. Last night, we had our live stream service on a Wednesday night, and afterwards from 10 p.m. until a little after midnight, I spent time with people from our church, investing in them. I spent time with a woman who's battling cancer, and I prayed with her and ministered to her. I spent time with another woman who's struggling significantly with mental health issues and recently lost her father. I prayed with her and ministered to her. I gave advice to a young man whose physical church that he attends is falling apart at the seams and going through a break, and I ministered to him and prayed for him. I also met a couple of people who were brand new to our church and didn't know me and had never met me, and I got to hear a little bit of their stories and hear what brought them to our church. One of those individuals is a woman who lives on a military base 15 hours away from me in the nation of Guam. I tell you all of that because I invested in each of those relationships, and we have a genuine connection with one another now, but I will likely, in this lifetime, never get to hug a single one of them. We are discipling them, caring for them, connecting with them, and hearing their stories. Learn to build digital relationships. The second is this: think beyond the service and begin thinking making disciples. Think beyond your service and think making disciples. The reality is there is a ton of conversation in the church world today about the rise in consumeristic Christianity. We're all worried about the fact that the average American comes to church once every 1.2 times per month or something. They are very rarely there, and their commitment level is growing smaller all the time, and we don't even really know the true impacts that the pandemic has had on it. Now, one of the main complaints about putting your service online or having an online campus is it just creates and reinforces a more consumeristic culture than we've already created. But if you think about it, the most consumeristic part of our churches is frequently our Sunday morning services. They're the times that people come in, have their kids taken care of and out of their hands. They can have a decent cup of coffee, a comfortable seat. They can hear a sermon, stand and sit. And outside of financially giving, which many Christians in America do not give anything, there's very little participation on their part. They can simply come and consume. So we complain about consumeristic Christianity in digital space, but the only thing that we oftentimes provide to the people who are part of our online experiences is the most consumeristic part of our church. Well, as a pastor, we know that our church on Sunday morning services is only the tip of the iceberg. It may get the most of our resources, but it's only the beginning of what it really means to be part of the bride of Christ. So when it comes to digital ministry and digital expressions of church, digital church planting, and your digital strategy, begin thinking beyond a live streamed service. It isn't enough to just take what's happening in your room on Sunday morning and ship it out and call it a digital campus or even a digital strategy for that matter. let alone a full ecclesiology of a digital church. Instead, we have to begin thinking making disciples, and we need to make plans and strategies and write processes and use the tools that enable us to engage with people on a genuinely deep level and disciple them to be more like Jesus. Not just provide something on YouTube or Facebook or whatever platform that you're choosing for them to consume. Church is so much more than just what we're doing on Sunday morning, and our online presence needs to mimic that and show it as well. Finally, examine the tools that you're using and make sure that they go beyond your broadcast. There are a ton of digital tools out there that you can use to be able to get your name out there and broadcast your church live to the internet so that anybody can watch it anywhere in the world. And I'm very thankful for many of those tools. But we don't often think critically about the tools that we're using. In fact, the internet is a two-way street. There's information that goes out, but there's also information that comes in. And one of the biggest problems we face in the church world when it comes to our digital presence is we only consider one side of the street. We ask ourselves, how can we use the internet as a tool to tell our story, rather than how can we live in the internet and be a presence there so that we can hear the stories of others. So we use the internet like a bulletin board. Our Facebook page becomes an opportunity for us to tell our church family or others about the latest event that we have coming up. We pay money and give it to Facebook so that they'll advertise that thing to other people who we don't know and who aren't part of our circle as well. We use the internet to broadcast our live services so people can come in and watch them. We use our branding to be able to make people aware. We post videos on Instagram and YouTube and look for engagement and followers so that more people are aware of our existence. And I'm not saying that any of those things are wrong. I'm simply saying that that is only one side of the street when it comes to our digital strategy. The other one is enabling us to hear the stories of people who are on the other side of screen names in profile pictures. Because as a church and as pastors, we have to stop seeing people as numbers, as engagement, as profile pictures, or as usernames. And we need to begin seeing them as genuine individuals with real stories and hurts and traumas and opportunities and giftedness that God has made. He loves them and cares for them. If you can begin seeing the person behind the screen name and behind the profile picture, you'll suddenly be able to have compassion on people that you previously didn't even really considered that they exist. And there's so much opportunity that you can find in digital space to engage with people in very, very powerful ways if you consider tools that go beyond the broadcast. Instead of just finding opportunities to tell your story, look for opportunities to open up the other side of the road and hear their stories. Every week at Lux, I sit down with people who are new to our church family, and I just ask them questions and hear their story. I hear what brought them to our church. I hear about their spiritual hurts. I hear about their church hurt. I hear about what's going on in their lives and how God has been at work in their life to bring them to where they are today. Because the most powerful tool in your tool belt when it comes to the internet is not telling your story or advertising your church. It's actually hearing their story and giving them an opportunity to engage with you. Look for tools that will open up the pathways to two-way communication when it comes to building digital relationships and building digital community. I hope that some of these tips on why and how to begin building a digital strategy, but not only that, to consider planting and starting digital churches, has been inspiring and helpful to you. The reality is the world that I live in, the ground is hard but fertile, and the workers are few. We need more churches that are about more than just broadcasting their services to the internet. We need more churches and pastors and leaders who are willing to lean in, not just to digital strategies, but to digital expressions of the church. There are thousands and thousands of people that will likely never find a home inside of a physical church, but may find a home inside of a fully digital expression of the church. And I need your help. We need your help reaching them. We need you to open up both sides of the street. And it may seem like an adventure, like it may seem completely outside of what you had considered before, and it may be even a little bit overwhelming to you. It may feel like you're heading out west in a wagon train and preparing for the gold rush. Yeah, there might be opportunity out there, but the road is going to be hard. But I really believe that if you get your wagon moving and you start heading west, what you will find is not shanty towns and gold mining villages, but a robust, bustling, and thriving city full of millions of people that you've been trying to reach, but simply didn't know where they were. I hope you'll come on the journey with me, and I hope this has been helpful to you. Please watch the rest of the videos in this playlist as you have time, or burn through them all and binge them right now, and begin prayerfully considering what the next step in the digital strategy for your church might be. I've been Mark from Lux Digital Church. Thank you so much for watching this video with me today. Thank you for investing in your leadership journey and exploring and rediscovering your church's digital why.